Hi, everybody. This is Alaya Mestrovich-C with Mindful Moments, brought to you by K-State Research and Extension. And today we have Mrs. Jerdine Coleman, who is a mental health supervisor for Pawnee Mental Health Services, as well as a Board of Education member for Manhattan-Ogden USD 383. Thanks for being with us today. We're going to go ahead and talk to Jerdine about mindfulness and trauma and how those are related. And so I wanted, if you could start just by telling us a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Sure, yeah. So like you mentioned, I am a mental health services supervisor at Pawnee Mental Health, which is our local community mental health center. So we service a total of 10 counties, but I am overseeing 3 counties, Riley, Potawatomi, and Marshall, and I have therapy staff in all those offices. And I am also on the Board of Education, so I'm in my first term as a board member and 3rd year, so I'm looking at the next election cycle coming up will be the one that I get to be involved in again. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So can you unpack what trauma is and how a trauma response works? What happens in the brain exactly?
Okay, that's a great question. So trauma is really, simply put, is the result of experiencing a situation that requires more of your mind and your body than you actually have the capacity to give. So it's kind of like an overtaxing of your system. When your mind and your body get overextended, that could be as a result of a one-time event, it could be the result of a chronic event, but you have difficulty coping with that event. And so that experience can be considered traumatic. What's unique about trauma is that the same situation isn't necessarily traumatic to everyone. And so you might find that you meet someone who is deeply distressed by something maybe that you have been through or something similar that you've been through, but it didn't affect you in the same way. And that's totally normal. And then the second question that you asked about what happens in your brain with trauma. So we all have this reptilian survival part of our brain that really gets activated when trauma is present. And that brain's job is basically to keep us alive. And it really makes sure that we aren't wasting energy on doing things that our brain normally does that aren't important when we're in survival mode. So the things that we need to do are be able to breathe and take big breaths, be able to move quickly, and really be able to use instincts to survive. And so a lot of things like higher order memory processing or logical thinking, those things turn off when you're in that trauma reaction mode.
So what is specifically happening to people right now during a global pandemic? Like, how can we counteract this type of trauma response?
Yeah, this is such a big question, but I think it's one that probably lots of people are thinking about right now. It is hard to generalize as far as how people are responding, but generally speaking, everybody is operating out of fear of not knowing what the next day is going to be like, or even what the rest of the day is going to be like, for that matter. So you might be experiencing some anxiety about your own health problems, or if you have family members who maybe are at higher risk. You might also have some fears about resources being scarce. And then there might be some distress you experience with being an essential employee, or even having some anger or frustration about the demands that are going on with like your child's academics, or maybe your workplace hasn't adjusted well to the pandemic. So the first part of really being able to counteract these long-term effects are really just lowering expectations. It's really important to always keep in mind that none of us have lived through a pandemic before. And so we don't know what we're supposed to do, and there is not a gold standard. It is totally okay to be in your pajamas all day some days. It's totally okay if your child doesn't log on and do school some days. Everybody is really in the same boat with trying to figure out how to cope. And so I am encouraging everyone that I work with, including my staff, to lower their expectations of themselves.
That's really helpful. Um, that's a great piece of advice there. Thank you. So can you tell us a little bit more why mindfulness and mindfulness work is so important?
Yeah. So the whole idea behind mindfulness is really about being present in the current moment. So a lot of people who deal with anxiety are really focused on not being able to control the future and what's going to happen. And people who struggle with depressed feelings are really struggling with being unsettled about things that have already happened. And so mindfulness helps us to really stop and center on what's happening right now. It pulls you out of that future or that past rumination to really focus on the present moment. And most often we find that when we are focused on the present moment, the things are more manageable. And so mindfulness really encourages everyone to seize the moment and to take control of your breath in that moment or what's in your visual space in that moment, for example.
So a lot of us have very different work situations right now. Everything's kind of up in the air. So what are your staff doing to create, opportunities for mindfulness practice for themselves throughout the day? What suggestions do you have?
Yeah. So it's so interesting. As therapists, we typically do a really great job of giving people life advice, and we don't always do well with following that life advice. Um,
Right.
so as a supervisor, I try to make it my goal to remind my staff to take care of themselves. Sometimes that's maybe taking some time off because we are essential employees, so we are all still working. So taking some time off, even if you feel like you need to be working. I also encourage them to just start the day with a positive statement or a mantra to really help them stay focused on the good things. And then the last thing is journaling for gratitude. That is such a small step that people overlook, but really taking time to focus on what are the things that I'm grateful for. Maybe you're grateful that you were able to get toilet paper early on, and so your family's not worried about it. Be grateful for the little things right now because the little things are what we have to hold on to.
So, what can parents do with children at home? I know there's a big focus on just getting them online to see their classmates and to connect with their teacher, but do you have some suggestions in terms of how parents can promote social emotional learning with their kids?
Yeah. This is a really hard thing for parents right now. A lot of my staff talk about just the level of stress that they're noticing in a lot of their parents, and just feeling like they need to be doing, and feeling just ill-equipped. And so again, going back to what I said earlier, lower your expectations, give yourself some grace. I also would encourage parents to consider starting the day off with what I call a soft start. So this is just the idea of a slow entry into the day. Rather than jumping out of bed and getting things started, start with some morning, snuggle time with your kiddos or playing some soft music in the morning as they're waking up. I know I don't like to be jolted out of bed first thing in the morning. And so I know little ones don't like that either. In those softer starts, try to do some mindfulness activities with your kids, some progressive muscle relaxation where you take time to tense and relax different parts of your body, or even a body scan where maybe you ask your child to think about how do their toes feel right now, and how do their knees feel, and how does their heart feel. Really just kind of helping your child slow down to start the day. And when you think about parents facilitating mindfulness, I think it's also important for parents to schedule some mindfulness breaks in the day for their kids and also for themselves. I've heard lots of families going for walks lately, which I think is fantastic because physical activity is great for us. When you go on those walks, a great way to practice some focused attention with your child is to pick something to look for on that walk. So we're going to count all the doors that we see, or all the cracks in the sidewalks, or all the red flowers that we see. And so now you're teaching your child to push away unimportant details and look specifically for something and focus only on one thing. And that's the gist of what mindfulness is, just being able to focus on one thing at a time.
Why is it so hard for us to be able to do that?
Yeah, well, because we live in a world of multitasking, right? So multitasking is like, and it's a badge of honor if you're a good multitasker. And so, I mean, even now, right? I had to make a point to silence my cell phone and turn it over so I don't see messages dinging in, and I want to look down and check. I had to minimize my email because I could see those rolling in, and I'm starting to think about answers to emails instead of focusing on this interview. So our environment has built us to pay attention to everything, and so it takes some special dedicated practice to start to weed out all those other things and focus on one thing at a time. It's challenging, definitely challenging.
Yes, it is. So do you have any resources that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so I have used this particular book, The Mindful Way Through Anxiety, by Elizabeth Romer and Susan Orsillo. This is a fantastic book for anyone struggling with anxiety who's open to mindfulness as a way to cope. They have tons and tons of activities, and I've used the I with clients, and I've also recommended it to my staff to use with clients. And I think it's a great self-help book for anyone to read. I also think that because mindfulness is kind of becoming a buzzword right now, is a great resource. There's so many activities online for kids to do mindfulness work. Lots of times there are things that maybe are tailored towards the classroom, but you can still read those lists and make it work for your home. And then the last thing, well, last two things I would say are Pinterest. I love using Pinterest for ideas. If you have a mental health guru that you like to follow, they often will have boards dedicated to different areas of mental health. And so check them out on Pinterest, and they will always have links to different sites for different activities. And then last, I don't know if you're aware, but the Headspace app has given opportunity for people to use it for free for a little while we're going through this time. And so the Headspace app is a great resource for guided meditations or guided mindfulness activities that you can use on the go on a tablet or a cell phone.
Oh, these are wonderful resources. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this with our extension community. And we'd like to know what you think and how you're using these resources, so please stay engaged. Thank you once again, Jardine, for your time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.